you to introduce yourself and then run through the lecture, maybe just also outline how you want to address the questions and things like that.
Sure.
Okay, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bridget. Good evening, everyone. As Bridget mentioned, my name is Kwezi, and I'll be taking you through units 21 and 22 of Module 2. By form of introduction, I'm a scientist. I'm a trichologist. I work for a cosmetic company, L'Oreal to be specific, and I've been with L'Oreal for the last 9 years. My background is in academia, and I love problem solving. I consider myself innovative and an entrepreneur, but that's taken a backseat in the last few years whilst I was building my corporate career. So congratulations on getting through this course so far. And as Bridget mentioned, it takes great commitment. It's almost there. It takes great commitment, especially as some people, if not most of you, are probably working at the same time. I tried it for my honors in formulation science when it first launched at NMMU for 2008, 2009, and I couldn't do it. I resigned halfway through that course to then be able to focus on the studies. So kudos to all of you and strength for the rest of the months ahead. Okay, so today we'll be going over the unit 21, which is on quality management. We'll talk about quality system, and this section will delve into what constitutes a quality system, its components, its overall purpose in an organization, and then we'll talk about quality design, and here we'll explore how quality is incorporated and considered during the product development and design phases of a product. And then lastly, for this unit, we'll get on to total quality management. And here we'll introduce a comprehensive management approach focused on continuous quality improvement across all aspects of an organization. In terms of questions, we can take them at the end. I may need to run around 6:30. I think that we should be done by then. If I'm not able to get to the questions, feel free to email me and I'll drop my email on the chat before I go off. I just have an urgency at work at 6:30. Okay. So this slide introduces a fundamental concept in quality control. And here the core idea is that the greater the gap or the disconnect between the person performing a job, for example, the manufacturer, and the ultimate customer, the higher the likelihood of problems arriving. And to mitigate problems from arising, it becomes increasingly crucial to implement checks and controls on the product before it reaches the customer. And this highlights the importance of timely intervention and feedback loops to ensure product quality and customer satisfaction at the end. When we talk about product quality, it's defined as a group of features or characteristics which meet the needs of a customer and provide satisfaction. And this emphasizes a customer-centric view of quality because essentially, right, we're making the products for an end user, which is typically the consumer, where the product attributes align with and fulfill consumer expectations or customer expectations, leading to their satisfaction. And the primary aim of a quality system is to make sure that customers get what they want or more whenever possible. And this goes beyond just meeting basic requirements to rather exceeding expectations, fostering customer loyalty rather, and positive brand perception. And there are different types of quality systems. And most of these are established quality systems, which are both local and global. And some examples include the ISO, which is the international standard, which is the International Organization for Standardization. And it's a globally recognized standard that provides requirements for quality management systems, such as ISO 9001. There's also the American Society for Testing and Materials. And this standard develops and publishes voluntary consensus technical standards for a wide range of products or materials, systems, and services. And then another example is also the British Standards, which is a standard produced by the British Standards Institution. Quality control is characterized as reactive because it primarily deals with inspecting and verifying a product quality after the product has been completed. It involves a procedure or a set of procedures intended to ensure that the manufactured product adheres to a defined set of quality criteria or meets the requirements of client or customer. This means that the QC checks if the final product or services meets predetermined standards and customer expectation. How we measure QC? QC is essentially a measure of the outcome after a process has already been completed. And it means that if defects are found, they're typically addressed at this stage, which can include at the end stage, which can involve rework, scrap, rejection of the product. And this highlights that QC is in fact about identifying non-conformances rather than preventing issues from arising in the first place. On the other hand, quality assurance is more forward-looking. The main goal of quality assurance is to prevent defects and thus ensure quality from the very beginning of a process. It's focused on providing confidence that quality requirements will be fulfilled. This means that it's about establishing systems and processes that ensures products are made correctly the first time around. I forgot to mention that you don't have to take slide screenshots. I will provide the slides as well as the notes through Bridget. Quality assurance also involves situations where people are responsible. It's basically about people taking responsibility that they've done what they're supposed to do before sending the product to the next step of the process. And this emphasizes building quality checks into every step of the production, ensuring that each step meets its quality requirements before proceeding, thereby reducing the likelihood of errors accumulating and therefore only being discovered at the final product. So it's basically each person in the process, and we'll talk about personnel later on and the importance of qualified and trained personnel. Each person making sure that they've done their part in the quality management system to ensure that the product is passed on in the best form as possible. So, but when the optimum is when we combine quality control and quality assurance, and this synergistic effect of combining both ensures that the product meets the customer expectations, because by proactively building QA and actively checking the final product, organizations can ensure that the product genuinely satisfies what the customer anticipates or desires. A combination of these two gives us good quality conformance, and it means that the product consistently adheres to defined specifications and standards. And the combination of these two, which is QA, which is basically preventing issues during production, and QC, which is about identifying issues that slip through before release or the active form. These two help ensure that the product is safe and performs as intended, that it's free from unwanted variations or hazard. And in essence, this approach is about making sure that the product is fit for purpose and reliably
then I quickly
delivers
videoed the files of 3 of the
on
projects
its
that I had in the office.
promise.
It might
Great.
give you an idea. Do you want to have a look at it? I can WhatsApp the videos to you.
I'm gonna
Obviously, as I
mute
said, the one is like
somebody.
top.
For some reason, your mic is coming through Tumilo's mic, Bridget. Okay. When we look at quality management, this is a broader concept that yields a measurable result. And unlike QC, which is about reactive inspection, and QA, which is about preventative processes, quality management is about the overall effectiveness of all quality-related activities, with a focus on achieving tangible, quantifiable improvements. And as the notebook says, it's more about the journey than the end result, in the sense that it encompasses the entire system and its continuous improvement, leading to better outcomes. And quality management refers to coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regards to quality. And this implies a systematic approach where all departments and processes work together synergistically to achieve quality objectives. And this, of course, would involve a good amount of planning, implementation, monitoring, and continuous improvement in all aspects affecting quality in an organization. What is a quality system made out of? It's made up of 4 components, and these 4 components collectively make up a comprehensive quality component. This is just an overview of the 4 different components. We'll get into each of them in the upcoming slides, but briefly, personnel. and this is the people that are involved in all stages of production and quality. We've got regulatory requirements that a quality system is made up of, and these are laws, standards, and guidelines that dictate quality practices in a particular region or where you want to sell your products. We've got physical facilities, and this is the environment. Excuse me. This is the environment and infrastructure where the products are actually manufactured, stored, and tested, from receiving of raw materials right all the way to the end product. We also have another core component, which is on documentation. And this is basically how we control documentation, the management of all records, procedures, and information related to quality, making sure that things are captured, stored, and reviewed regularly. If we deep dive on the first component, which is personnel, this is considered one of the most important components in most quality systems, because even with the most robust systems and advanced technologies, human competence and commitments are indispensable for quality. It's the whole thing also about AI and AI replacing human beings. It's not AI that will replace human beings. It's human beings that use AI that will replace, well, that will take over jobs of people that don't use AI. So it's about the people first and how they then apply their expertise within the system. So it says that the system is only as good as its people. And this adage underscores that the success or failure of any quality initiative ultimately rests on the individuals who need to execute that process and make the decisions, because ultimately it's us as people that are, at least for the time being, that make that execute some of those decisions. It's not as the same as it was a few years ago, but there's still a huge part of human intervention. And with the importance of, I hope you can't hear the background. You can't hear the people in my background, I hope. My noise suppression is on. Am I audible clearly without any background noise? Please just
Yeah, it seems
confirm
fine,
that.
Crazy.
It's all good? Okay.
Yeah.
Super. So as I mentioned, personnel are, thank you for confirming. Personnel are a key component. It therefore stands to reason that the correct number of people ensures the highest level of quality. Of course, it has to be people that know what they need to be doing. The correct number of people ensures the highest level of quality and a successful system. And this means that it's not only about competent staff, but also about how many people are actually there to effectively manage all the quality-related tasks without being overwhelmed, which, as we can anticipate, would lead to errors. Some key requirements for personnel, for those that want to run their own businesses, or things to look out for in an organization, is that the personnel that are involved in the quality management, product development phase all throughout are trained and qualified. These employees must possess the necessary knowledge, skills, and expertise for their different roles, because everyone contributes and errors add up and therefore get discovered at the end. Another key personnel requirement is that they have to be in a safe working environment. So safety requirements must be enforced, as it impacts employee well-being and the quality of their work. Personal hygiene awareness and training, such as the importance and adherence to wearing PPE, gloves, masks, depending on the kind of work that you'll be doing. And this is particularly vital, of course, in industries like the cosmetic industry, where proper hygiene would help prevent contamination and ensure product safety. So cosmetics, food, pharmaceuticals are quite important. And precautionary procedures need to be taken care of, and these need to be developed to ensure no product contributes to the health issues of personnel. So precautionary measures related to the hygiene issue above. But these speak to the occupational health and safety that could prevent employees, that must prevent employees from handling materials, operating dangerous equipment without adequate training. We also have good manufacturing practices that personnel must follow at all times. And these GMP are basically critical regulations that ensure that products are consistently produced and controlled according to quality standards. And adherence to GMP is fundamental for product safety, efficacy, especially in cosmetics and pharmaceutical industries, like I mentioned, but it's people that follows these principles, right? So that's why it's coming up under personnel. The second core component is regulatory requirements, which are applicable. And this slide is just some of the examples within the context of the South African industry, but similar frameworks exist globally. Locally, some examples of regulatory requirements are the Consumer Protection Act, which is a broad legislation designed to protect the rights of consumers, ensuring fair practices and product safety. We also have the these are just all the examples, these are just examples, not a comprehensive list, but we also have the Trade Metrology Act, which governs weights and measures, ensuring that there's accuracy in product quantity claims and even manufacturing, because if you intend to weigh 5 grams, but your balance is not calibrated, it weighs 7 grams, that will have, it could wastage for you as the manufacturer, but also depending on the raw material, it could put consumers at risk because there are, of course, limits to some of the actives that are put in cosmetics or in manufacturing of different products. And this Trade Metrology Act is vital also for fair trade and consumer trust, because it also ensures that your products you're able to manufacture products with the same quality and efficacy every single time. We also have locally the Advertising Standards Authority Code of Practices, and this regulates advertising content to ensure that it's truthful, it is not misleading, it is ethical, and that it prevents false claims about cosmetic products. And there's also CTFA compendium, which I hope some of you have heard of. And this compendium basically is a comprehensive guide of standards from the Cosmetic, Toiletry and Fragrance Association. And it provides guidelines and requirements for cosmetic products. And within this compendium, there's various aspects that are covered. We have good manufacturing practices. We have the trade, so some of the ones that I mentioned above, but in addition to that, we know that the South African cosmetic industry is a self-regulatory body where it's the industry's own commitment to ethical advertising, which complements statutory requirements. It means that competitors, consumers are the ones that would raise issues when they see a deviation from some of these acts. And then we've got within the CTFA compendium, we also have guidelines. There's also guidelines about specific regulations regarding products containing alpha-hydroxy acids and beta-hydroxy acids. There's also guidelines about hair care, regulations pertinent to hair care, skin lighteners, which entails specific control for products used for skin lightening, and which is often due to products that require careful regulation. We know that there's sometimes a deviation of this where skin lighteners are available in the mass market or even in illicit black market without. I'm still sure that you can't hear the background. It's really getting loud. Just give me a second. Should be better now, at least for my side. On illicit skin lighteners, we know that these are widely available. However, there are regulations that govern how skin lighteners are made available in the industry, and it should typically be through the prescription of a doctor. We do know that there are some that are available over the counter, but these should not have medical claims and in that sort of context. We also have the South African National Standards, and this is the Bureau of Standards. It's responsible for developing and maintaining national standards, which ensures that products and services meet certain quality and safety criteria in South Africa specifically. Okay. The next core component is the physical facilities themselves, where the product is manufactured. And these go over and above the importance of the, sorry, let me just recap. On this section, we'll go over the importance of well-designed and maintained physical facilities in a quality system. And as we know, physical facilities refers to where the products themselves are manufactured, where, as I mentioned earlier, where they're processed in terms of the raw materials as they come in, where they're stored, where they're tested, and also where they're controlled. And this covers, the facilities covers the entire life cycle of the product within the manufacturing environment. Good housekeeping is also a requirement in all areas, and this emphasizes the need for cleanliness, orderliness, and proper maintenance throughout the facility to ensure that there is no contamination, ensure product safety, and promote efficiencies. So systems such as first in, first last, I don't have the phrase off the top of mind right now, but basically the last raw material that came in should be the one that goes out first in terms of you using it, that doesn't stick up on the, doesn't stay in the storage.
Let me know and I can put them through.
I'm gonna mute Tabile. Sorry. Yeah, some key considerations for facilities are that they're suitably designed. They must be designed to meet product specifications, safety, and authority requirements. And this includes specific structural and environmental considerations, such as that the facilities must have flame-proof stores for the storage of flammable materials. There must be sufficient ventilation within the manufacturing facility to ensure to maintain good air quality for those working in the environment, remove fumes, and control temperature and humidity, as this may lead to degradation of your raw materials or even your products as you continue producing. The facilities must also have dust extraction to prevent particulate contamination, especially in crucial industries like the manufacturing and the cosmetic industry. The facilities must have measures to prevent cross-contamination, and you need to have a design and operational procedures such as the separation areas, controlled airflow, to ensure that different products or ingredients do not mix inadvertently. Regarding raw materials within a facility must have their own designated area, in a specific area which is clearly defined to prevent mix-ups, contamination, and ensure proper management of inventory, what I mentioned earlier about not letting raw materials stock up, but using, of course, what's still within its correct shelf life, but using that first before using the newly delivered stock. Correct ventilation and lighting should be available at all times within the physical facilities. And this means that consistent and appropriate ventilation and lighting are crucial for, of course, worker comfort, safety, and accurate visual inspection operations. The laboratories also encompass the physical facilities, and these need to be validated at all times. Quality control laboratories must be properly equipped. Their test methods must be validated, and they must be operational whenever needed to ensure ongoing quality checks. This takes me back to my days working for a chocolate factory and working through Christmas, because we needed to ensure that people get smooth chocolate without any rancidity in the nuts. For the physical facilities and for the personnel, ablution facilities need to be available and well maintained and on the sites. And this ensures adequate and hygienic washing facilities. This also includes adequate and hygienic washing facilities for personnel to ensure that people are able to maintain personnel hygiene and prevent contamination. And this talks to the fact that there's personnel that are responsible for the quality and ensuring the safety of products, but also about the owner of the facilities or the manufacturing plant, ensuring that they enable the personnel to be able to work in the best conditions and maintain the core components of quality systems. Within the physical facilities themselves, there's got to be waste material and refuse disposal in a way that's safe and sanitary. There needs to be proper procedures for handling and disposing of waste, which is crucial for maintaining hygiene and environmental protection. and preventing contamination within the facility, but also even outside the facilities. There's also guidelines on how to dispose of waste material from your manufacturing process, which one needs to be cognizant of, and on how you need to treat the water before releasing it into the mainstream. And then the fourth component is the critical role of documentation and data in a quality system, which is important for traceability. And traceability is basically the ability to track a product, its component, or its processes through all the stages of production, distribution, and use. It is basically a fundamental requirement of good manufacturing practices and is vital for managing quality, handling complaints, and performing recalls. So if a complaint is received about a particular batch of product that is doing harm to one of a handful of consumers, we need to be able to track what the manufacturing processes that were used to actually manufacture the product, that it was done according to specifications, and be able to perform recalls if necessary, if the entire batch is affected. In terms of control of the quality of documentation and data, this needs to be available and maintained. All documentation and data must be available and maintained at all times, and meaning that they should be easily accessible, they should be legible, they should be accurate and protected from loss or alteration. And some examples of key documentations include our SOPs, which are standard operating procedures, which are basically detailed instructions of how to perform routine operations. And this ensures, SOPs ensure that there's consistency and adherence to best practices, because as you would know from manufacturing, if there's a defined set of guidelines of how to manufacture a product in terms of temperature, of stirring rate, if there's a deviation from that, the consistency of the product would then deviate from the quality that you would anticipate. Other examples of key documentations include validated specifications and test methods, and these are procedures used to test raw materials, in-process samples, or finished products to ensure that they meet the defined specifications, with evidence that these methods are suitable for their intended use. So validated methods and typically industry-wide methods that are certified. Another example is also specific operator training manuals, and these are documents that guide the training of personnel on specific tasks, equipment, or processes, ensuring that they're competent and qualified. A typical one, not necessarily in the lab, is how to operate a forklift. Not everyone can just jump on a forklift and use it, but others in the lab could include how to operate a mechanical tensile tester, for example, a pH meter, or an auto-titrator to be able to measure different components of a product. And then another example is the safety environmental impact study data. And these are basically records related to safety assessments and environmental impact of processes and products, and these demonstrating compliance with regulations and responsible operations. I mentioned earlier that it's not only what you do inside the lab in terms of the products that you handle and then you release the waste out to the external environment, but there's also a consideration to be made about the safety and the environmental impact of your products as you release them in a way, as you should release them in a way that's within regulations of how to manufacture those products and in a way that is responsible. And then another component is the personnel authority responsibility and approval list. And this is basically a clear outline of who is authorized to perform certain tasks, what the responsibilities of those people are, who has the approval authority for critical documents and decisions. So if there's a spec for a particular, let's say, moisture analysis, I'll go back to my Cadbury days, moisture analysis in a particular product, if there's deviations, there are buffers of getting a concession to proceed if that deviation is low risk, but there's got to be personnel that to then validate that. Of course, this depends on the industry, and I would think that there are stricter industries. So, for example, chemicals, straighteners, those kind of things would have more stricter guidelines and need to not deviate too much from the specifications, unlike things like maybe fat content or particle size, or even color. There would be like plus minus within the specs for those things, which can sometimes be authorized to not just override, but like to make concessions on certain things. And then one of the last components is also that's very important is the calibration and validation procedures for equipment. So we know that all this ecosystem is as good as its checks and calibration checks, and the calibration and validation procedures for equipment. This basically is about documentation detailing how equipment is calibrated to ensure that it ensures it's how an instrument is adjusted to ensure accuracy, and its validation to prove that it is consistently performing the task as intended to ensure reliable measurements and processes. This could be from measuring the viscosity of a particular product. It could be maybe even something as simple as I mentioned the example of the Trade Metrology Act earlier, something as simple as ensuring that your balance is calibrated to be able to ensure that it reliably measures the correct weights each time to avoid risks to your consumer, but also wastage on yourself if you are overweight, as an example. I'm going to admit Olivia. Okay, and then the second component in this unit is on quality design. And, excuse me. Quality design focuses on how quality is embedded into a product from its earliest development stages. And this signifies that quality isn't just about inspecting the final product, but it's about designing it right from the start. Maintaining a good quality system from the brief. This is the central question that you see here is how do you make sure that you maintain a quality system when developing a product from the brief? And this implies a structural approach from the initial conceptual steps. And the key steps in quality design are basically checking that, reviewing current legislation before design begins. It's crucial to understand and comply with all the relevant laws and regulations. For example, the safety, the ingredient restrictions, the labeling requirements of that product that you're going to be making. And this ensures that the product is legally compliant right from its inception, rather than you making it and then having to retrofit or make some modifications. Say, for example, a particular raw material is not allowed to be used in a particular country. You have a UV filter that works well, that is more accessible, but it's not approved in the context that you want to sell your product in. So it's good to be aware of those things beforehand. Another key step in quality design is to use approved and certified suppliers. And this basically is about sourcing of raw materials and components from trusted suppliers who meet defined quality standards. And this is to help you prevent quality issues from entering production chain early on. So as we know, garbage in, not so great outcome out. So if we use reputable suppliers, the raw materials that we put in to make our products then help us have confidence that the product at the end would be of a certain, gives us confidence of the outcomes of the product, be it your base formula, and even more so for your active ingredients, where you want to use a reputable supplier and certified supplier to be able to get all the performance data of a particular active, to be sure that you can anticipate, and of course you still need to do your own test, but that you know what you can anticipate in terms of performance. The other component is the relevant data on material processes, and it's about collecting and analyzing data related to all materials and processes involved in manufacturing. And this helps in making informed design decisions and predicting product performance. Okay, equipment use must be maintained and validated in a safe and easy, and it needs to be safe and easy to use. The equipment used in production must be suitable for its purpose. It needs to be regularly maintained to ensure consistent performance and validated to prove it consistently produces products that meet quality standards, and it needs to be easy to use in order to reduce errors. The last component is on control limits, which need to be validated. And this is about defining and validating control limits for critical process parameters, and it helps to ensure that it helps to inform uniform results across all manufactured batches to reduce deviation from batch to batch, meaning that this would contribute to consumer trust as well. These limits establish the acceptable range within which a process must operate to consistently produce a quality product. And the validation confirms that these limits are actually effective. Quality conformance basically bridges the gap between a product's design and its actual manufacturing. This means that how well the manufactured product, this means how well the manufactured product meets the specifications and intentions laid out in the designs. Conformance of a product is about where the product conforms to what it was designed to be. It is about the interpretation by manufacturing, and this involves the interpretation of the product development stage by the manufacturing department, for example, the lab, from lab to production scale, and this highlights the critical step of transferring the design from the R&D small scale phase to large scales or an intermediate step. And it helps to reduce misinterpretations or difficulties in scaling up, which could lead to conformance issues. Maintaining quality systems, control and specifications. These are tools used to ensure that manufacturing processes consistently produce products that conform to design, and systems provide the framework. Control limits define acceptable variation and specifications set the precise requirements. Okay, sorry about that. Please give me 30 seconds. There's just somebody at the door. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. Quality of conformance is also about the challenge with parameters. We know that in the real world, manufacturing environments can introduce variability, which makes it difficult to perfectly replicate lab scale results. And these factors like equipment differences, the mixing intensity, such as shear rate, and other process variables can affect the final product's ability to conform to the design. And this is why it's important to have robust controls and to be open to making some potential design adjustments as one moves up from lab scale to production scale. When we continue on quality of conformance, we're going to specifically focus on how to establish a robust system for transferring quality requirements from design to manufacturing. And this is about creating a transfer system. The question that's been asked is, how do we create a transfer system where all expected quality requirements are achieved and maintained? And this emphasizes the need for a systematic approach to ensure that design intentions are accurately translated into production limits. And there are two critical steps in quality conformance. The first step is to train the manufacturing departments. It is essential to train the manufacturing department in the correct and required manufacturing procedure, of course, and this ensures that the personnel involved in production fully understand production design, its critical attributes, the precise steps needed to manufacture it according to quality standard. And this, of course, means that proper training minimizes error due to misunderstanding or lack of skill. It's to ensure that there is a good transfer and an alignment on within the upscaling part. The second component is defined control limits of the end product. And this means that as you scale up, you need to define clear, measurable boundaries for the final product characteristics. Because if a process variable needs to be adjusted during production, the impact of that change on the final product performance must be understood. So we make calculated risks. The impact of that change needs to be scientifically validated and officially approved before implementation. I mentioned earlier about having documentation where this kind of approvals, well, the person that's authorized to make this kind of improvements needs to be clearly defined. And this also prevents, it helps to prevent like random arbitrary changes that could compromise the quality of your products. If you are a developer by yourself, it's important to be the one that's making the notes on the different modifications you have made so that the final product that you validated, you're able to carry that final set of defined limits to your best product rather than having to tweak and modify each time. Okay. Cost and quality of design. The economic aspects of quality, specifically concerning cost and design. The main goal of quality control, which is one of the primary objectives in any production system, is to achieve quality goals at the lowest possible cost. And this basically highlights the importance of efficiency in a quality management system, which seeks to optimize processes to deliver quality without incurring excessive expenses. This does not necessarily mean cutting corners in your quality control or your manufacturing processes, but it's rather being prudent about the things that you put in place to ensure that you do the basics and still deliver a quality product. The implementation principles for quality control, processes and methods, these should be straightforward, and control processes should be straightforward and intuitive for employees to follow, because complexity can lead to errors and inefficiency. The implementation of quality control should not unduly increase the final cost of the product. I think I mentioned the point about cost above. And ideally, effective quality processes need to reduce waste, they need to reduce rework, recalls, and thereby lowering overall costs in the long term. And basically, the goal of this is to ensure a cost effectiveness in your quality assurance. This slide is just a visualization of the concept of optimum balance between the cost of achieving quality and the value derived from the quality. It's basically the balance between the cost of quality control, and losses. It basically says that the balance between cost of quality control and losses determines the success of a quality system and success or failure of a product. This means that investing in quality control should ideally lead to a reduction in losses associated with poor quality, which would mean things like the rework, returns, loss of reputation. And a successful quality system finds a sweet spot where the investment in, which is optimum balance, where the investment in quality yields a greater return by preventing future losses. Excuse me a second. I'm still here. Okay. When we look at QC quality control departments do not necessarily control quality. They only monitor quality. And this is a crucial distinction because QC departments typically inspect and monitor the quality of products at various stages or at the end of the line. They identified issues, but are not primarily responsible for setting up the processes that prevent those issues. The role of the QC lab is to report on the quality achieved and to achieve successful quality control, which also helps to increase production and reduce overall recalls, is to make QC truly effective and impactful on production efficiency and recall reduction. It would be necessary to empower and train and motivate everyone that handles the products. This is a critical link. Excuse me. Empowering and training and motivating people that are involved in handling of the product is a critical link, because while QC monitors, the actual control of quality comes from every individual that is involved in the process. And by empowering people and providing them the necessary training, motivating them, they become responsible for building quality in their work, reducing the burden on our reactive QC. And then quality assurance, here we mentioned that it's about monitoring and reporting of quality issues. We provide information used to understand problem areas. While quality assurance is preventative, it also involves monitoring and reporting. But in the case of quality assurance, it is aimed at assessing the effectiveness of preventative systems and identifying systematic weaknesses and optimizing reducing the likelihood of those, improving or rather strengthening those systemic issues. And the information gathered helps to understand the root causes. The information gathered in quality assurance optimization helps to understand the root cause of problems and continuously improve the overall quality systems, and thus ensures that quality requirements are consistently met throughout your various batches in your manufacturing plant. And then as we get to the last component of Unit 1, which is total quality management. And TQM is basically a comprehensive and evolving approach to quality. It is a new trend and a method. Back then, I don't think TQM, back then when we did the notes, it was a new trend. Now it's been around for many years. And it emerged as a modern approach to quality, shifting from isolated quality functions to an organization-wide philosophy. TQM incorporates all aspects and sectors of a company. It is a defining characteristic of TQM is in its holistic nature. It's not just confined to the QC department or the laboratory. Instead, it involves every function, process, or even the manufacturing. Instead, it involves every function, every process, and employee in the organization. And many international and national quality standards like ISO or the British standards for quality management systems are underpinned by the principles of TQM. And basically, TQM influence the fact that these are implemented worldwide means it indicates the influence of TQM on global quality benchmarks. Within TQM, as I mentioned, everyone is responsible for the implementation and the success. TQM promotes the idea of shared responsibility for quality itself. It empowers employees at all levels to contribute to quality improvement rather than centralizing it to within a specific department and then pointing fingers to that department if there's issues. And in order to implement total quality management, a lot of work needs to go in. Implementing it is said to be quite a significant undertaking that requires fundamental changes to an organization's culture, process, and management practice. It's not a quick fix, but a long-term transformation plan. Imagine a context where we left it to chance, or we left it to a handful of people to ensure quality of a product, to now ensuring that everyone recognizes that it's their responsibility as well, from the person that's offloading the raw materials onto the factory floor to the people that are loading the different raw materials on the production line, the packaging department, the lab itself. It's basically making that organization-wide transformation, mental and cultural transformation. TQM implementation is basically, thus, as you can imagine, is a long-term commitment because of its pervasive nature and the depth of changes requirement. It requires a demand sustained and unwavering commitment from top management down. And because without this, the implementation of TQM, where we don't walk the talk, implementation of TQM is likely to fail. So everybody needs to take it seriously, especially from the top, so that we can model the right behaviors. Implementation and management of TQM comes with a cost, but is of course less expensive than recalling of products. Because while investing in TQM, initially investing in TQM incurs costs such as the training of staff, re-engineering your process, your production processes, and putting in place new systems. These costs are generally less expensive than a recall, even in terms of more than financial, but reputation and long-term financial gain. And this highlights the economic benefit that proactive quality management is more cost effective in the long term, like I just mentioned, rather than dealing with severe financial and reputational damage caused by product recall. So it is a worthwhile investment, even though it may be painful in its initial stages, especially if the culture has been relaxed for a long time or other systems were used and now we need to cause a culture shift. Okay. The slides the slide connects ISO system directly to TQM, and it basically provides a specific example within the South African context where we have a TQM system used in South Africa, which is the ISO 22716. And in the South African context, the standard is a key framework for implementing TQM. Particularly, it's relevant for the cosmetic industry, and it pertains to GMP for cosmetic procedures. And it provides guidelines for the production, the storage, the shipment of cosmetic products. We also have independent ISO consultants, which normally perform the implementation because there is a complexity and specific requirements because of the complexity and specific requirements of ISO standards. Organizations generally engage external consultants who specialize in ISO implementation. And the role of these consultants is to guide the company through the process of establishing, documenting and implementing the required quality management system. But it still stands that an individual company can implement it and audit it to get an individual company can implement TQM and is audited to get the required ISO rating. Because even though the consultant can assist, ultimately, the company itself is responsible for implementing the ISO system. And once implemented, an independent certification body conducts an audit to verify that there's compliance within the particular standard that the company can then claim in its manufacturing guidelines. And if successful, the company receives an ISO certification, signifying adherence to internal quality management systems. And then in terms of a basic outline for quality review system, these are the critical areas that need to be defined, controlled, and regularly reviewed to ensure quality. We've got formulations, and this refers to the precise recipes and compositions of products, including their raw materials and their proportions, the percentage of each raw material in the formula. We've got specifications, and this is detailed requirements for raw materials, intermediate products, and finished goods. And the specifications also outline their physical, chemical, and microbiological characteristics. We have procedures, and these are SOPs that describe how tasks are performed to be performed consistently across all operations. We have records within the TQM quality review system, and this is a documentation of all activities, tests, results, and decisions, providing evidence of compliance and traceability, which is a key component in quality management system. And then we've got controls, which is basically making sure that the systems and methods used to monitor processes and products, including inspections, testing, and audit, to ensure that they meet the specified requirement. And these 5 components, or these 5 elements, are the backbone of a robust quality system under TQM, and they ensure that the quality is managed at every stage, from concept of the product to its delivery. We'll now deep dive into each of these. The first one, the first element of TQM, of a TQM quality review, is formulation. And the slide just highlights the 8 essential criteria that a formulation should possess to ensure quality and traceability. This is that the standard sample, having a definitive approved sample of a product to serve as a benchmark for comparison. So establishing that what the benchmark is for a particular product that you want to formulate. Where you would need a product name, that's unique identification, mark on name or code or number, meaning that each product must have a clear, unique identifier to prevent confusion and facilitate tracking of products that are being made. The third component or criteria is the validation and supersede dates. Formulations need to be validated to prove they consistently produce the desired product. Supersedes date indicate when a formulation has been outdated or replaced, ensuring only the current versions of the formulation protocol are being used. This is what I mentioned about keeping track of the modifications that have been made to ensure that that final or the current version is what is used for upcoming batches. The next criteria is the complete list of raw materials that are traceable. They need to be traceable in terms of the name of the raw material, the code of the raw material, and the lot number that the raw material was in when it was delivered. And every ingredient must be clearly identified and its origin. So lot number, supply, etc., must be traceable. And this is crucial for investigation if quality issues arise downstream. The fifth criteria is weight measures or percentage of each raw material. And here it's about the precise quantities for each ingredient are essential for producibility and consistent product quality. The sixth variable is the variables themselves that need to be included and parameters that are required for the manufacturing of the product. These need to be included and clearly explained. Because any critical variable in the manufacturing process and the acceptable parameters must be documented and understood to ensure consistency. The sixth parameter is raw materials needs to be from sound and trustworthy suppliers. And ideally, you should have 2 or 3 certified suppliers per raw material, because sourcing of raw ingredients needs to be from reliable, certified suppliers, and this helps to minimize the risk of receiving substandard materials. And the additional component about having the additional thought of having multiple suppliers also provides, having multiple certified suppliers provides redundancy. So redundancy in the sense that people don't have a monopoly on the pricing, and it gives you negotiating power. And then lastly, in terms of formulations, it is raw material traceability, which is to identify problems and non-conformance. The ability to trace raw materials back to their source is vital. If a problem is discovered in a final product, traceability allows for identification of the problematic ingredient, batch, and its source, enabling swift corrective action to avoid using that batch again and the reoccurrence of the incident or the quality deviation from happening. Another critical component of TQM is the specifications, and this section defines their purpose and outlines five basic principles of specifications. Firstly, the purpose of specifications. A product should meet the highest possible specs, and they must be achievable. This means that setting ambitious yet realistic quality standards for products. Another basic principle is the role in conformance. The specifications are required for qualitative and quantitative measures used to check product performance at any time in the production cycle. And this provides a measurable benchmark against which product quality is assessed throughout the manufacturing process and not just at the end. There are 5 principles of specifications. The specifications need to be identified by a specific code or number. Each specification must have a unique identifier for ease of reference, the version control, and to avoid confusion. The specification must be linked to a specific test and to be validated to a relevant test methods. Because specifications are only meaningful if they are defined, validated, if there are defined and validated methods to verify compliance. And this test must be appropriate and reliable for measuring the certain attributes. The 5th principle around specification is that they need to be realistic and consistently achievable. They should be challenging, but practically attainable within the manufacturing capabilities and raw material availability, because unrealistic specifications lead to constant non-conformance. So it's about setting a good bar, but being realistic about achieving or developing a product that's within those specifications. The 4th principle on specification is on that they need to be refreshed, superseded, and reviewed every 2 years, because they're not just static documents. Just because something worked well 3 years ago, it doesn't mean that it needs to be, we keep it. The specifications themselves need to be reviewed regularly every 2 years to ensure that they remain current, relevant, and reflect any changes in materials, processes, or regulatory requirements. And old versions must be superseded. So the context of when this would be if a particular raw material is modified to have maybe a smaller molecular weight and therefore easier penetration. You'd want to, yes, look at that raw material, but because now you have more efficacy because of the modifications in the active ingredient itself, you may want to consider reviewing the specs of how that needs to be used. And then the specifications need to specifications that have not been validated, they need to be marked as tentative, because if a specification or test method is linked to it, has not undergone a formal validation process, it should be clearly marked as tentative, and this indicates that its reliability and achievability is still being confirmed. So it's about documenting and ensuring that all the different stakeholders are on the same page about the expectation of the different components, be it raw materials, be it quality control measures. What do we get specifications for? So there are different categories of items within a production process which specifications are essential. And this here I'll just highlight the fact that quality standards apply throughout the entire value chain. So in terms of specifications, we've got specifications related to raw materials, and these are detailed specifications for all incoming ingredients, components. And this specification raw materials ensures that their quality before they even enter the production. So certificates of analysis, making sure that the product that you used the last time, or the one that's incoming, matches the quality of what's coming in, so that you don't have deviations. Specifications also apply for packaging materials, such as the specifications on bottles, on jars, on tubes, labels, cartons, covering dimensions, the color of the packaging, the shape, the materials that are used, because as we can imagine, cosmetic products or products in general interact with the packaging. So it's important to ensure that there are no deviations from what you've validated your product, especially in terms of stability and efficacy versus what you then produce on the long term. So it's basically to ensure that you adhere to what you had validate your new product, your new packaging, or your ongoing packaging adheres to the defined specifications, even in terms of aesthetic requirements and functional performance. And in fact, it's becoming more important now to keep a mind on packaging materials. We know that we live in an age of counterfeit products, some trademark infringements, where you need to be sure that your product is clearly and consistently recognized by consumers, because it may get lost in the sea of artificial or counterfeit products, or even like not necessarily dupes, because those are not necessarily about the packaging, mimicking the packaging, but more about the efficacy and the product intention. So just a comment on the packaging material, or lookalikes, even, where people would, some smaller manufacturers may create stuff that's very similar to yours. So you want to be able to ensure that yours does not deviate from its intended specifications, so that consumers are able to consistently recognize your trademarks, your colors, your shapes, your labels, etc. And then specifications also apply to processes, where it is the specifications for the manufacturing steps themselves, including parameters like mixing speed, the temperature, the fill weights, because you also want to serve your customers well. You do not want to underfill, and you also want to serve yourself well. You don't want to overfill. And processing times, like how long it takes to how optimum your filling line is, for example, even your packaging line, even your manufacturing line. Those things need to be optimized, and the process and the specifications for those processes marked out, so that whoever is then running, and even if there's differences in operators, people are able to work according to those specifications. And then another important component, of course, in terms of specification, is the final product, where the comprehensive specifications, this is about the comprehensive specifications for the finished goods, and it covers things like the sensory attributes, the color, the odor, the texture of the product, the physical properties like pH or viscosity, the chemical composition itself, which hopefully you would have covered in the manufacturing of the product. The specifications also cover the microbiological purity, the stability, and the performance of your final product. And I made a note here that each of these include different information, and it refers to the earlier discussions on quality design and quality of conformance. I need to accelerate a little bit. Excuse me. Procedures. So we'll talk about procedures, and these are specifically designed standard operating procedures. And as we know, procedures are a cornerstone of quality management. And procedures are basically detailed instructions. Procedures are defined as detailed instructions to develop, manufacture, pack, dispatch, clean, and manage product from concept to consumer. So the whole value chain. And this definition emphasizes their role in standardizing every step of the product cycle, which ensures consistency and quality from batch to finish. The SOP is just I think everyone knows, it's the acronym for Standard Operating Procedure, and it is essential for training, for compliance and for ensuring that tasks are performed uniformly regardless of who's performing it. And some key attributes of SOPs are that they need to be validated and substantiated. To just elaborate, SOPs should be based on proven methods and scientific rationale, and the effectiveness in achieving desired outcomes should be demonstrated, therefore they're validated, the intention and the outcome. Another key attribute is that another key attribute of SOPs is that the personnel involved need to be experienced and trained, because those executing the SOPs must have the necessary experience and training to perform the task correctly and understand the implications of their actions on quality and the deviation of their actions. Sometimes it's not easy to adhere to quality standards, but people know the risks. Sometimes the production line is waiting, literally standing still, waiting for the outcome of certain tests that you've done. So it's important for the personnel to be experienced and trained, to know when in the process of quality control or compliance check, they can release a product with low or minimum risk. And if, in terms of procedures, if there are any changes on the SOP, they need to be accepted and fully understood by the person that's involved, because any modifications need to be formally reviewed by people that are users, and they need to be approved and communicated to all relevant or personnel. And it is crucial that everyone understands and accepts the changes to maintain compliance. Here it's about influence as well, on making sure that there's buy-in, there's rationale and buy-in on the changes of the procedures, which is sometimes not easy because sometimes the changes in SOPs could mean an additional step or a slight modification in a step, which could be met with resistance. What does an SOP cover? Okay, an SOP covers let me start first. This is basically a document that ensures clarity, traceability, and accountability. The details, an SOP must be thorough and it should include the subject. This is basically the specific process or task that the particular SOP addresses. It needs to have an SOP number, which is the unique identification number for easy tracking and version control of a particular SOP. And it needs to have the name of the person that's ensuring the SOP by identifying the author or responsible party. And as mentioned earlier, the supersedes number, which indicates if this particular SOP that a person would have on file within the production is replaces a previous version, or if it should specify the supersedes document number. The SOP should have a reference number, which is any other relevant document numbers that support or are referenced within the SOP. It should have all the relevant dates, such as the creation date, the effective date, the review dates, and the revision date. An SOP also includes the personnel responsible for the implementation of the SOP, because not everyone can perform a task. I mentioned earlier the importance of trained and knowledgeable personnel for different tasks. And the SOP would clearly define who's accountable for putting the SOP into practice, like who is the one who executes it. It should also include the personnel responsible for the SOP compliant. So, for example, it should identify who's the person that's responsible for ensuring that the steps outlined in the SOP are strictly followed. It should also include the purpose of the SOP, which is just a brief explanation of why the SOP exists and its objectives. And then the detail of the SOP would be the action steps, which is basically the step-by-step instruction for performing the tasks. And it should be written in a plain, concise, and unambiguous manner. And then completion of use, it's basically about what happens when the task is finished, including any required sign-off or documentation. And lastly, it should also include acceptance signatures of above personnel, so the different people that are implicated. So signatures from relevant personnel, such as the manager, the quality assurance manager, indicating that they have reviewed the SOP, they've understood the SOP, and they've approved the SOP and are committed to its adherence. excuse me, and basically, when you look at an SOP, it should be, or when you look or prepare an SOP, it should be a thorough and easy to understand document. And it must be comprehensive enough to cover all the necessary details, but also written in a simple, clear language that is easy to be understood by all users that need to be able to execute the task that you are giving the operating procedure for. And in manufacturing, different types of procedures exist, and these are typically applied, and basically it just highlights the wide range importance of standardizing of SOPs. Some different types of SOPs are laid out in the slide. It's basically development procedures, which is about the procedures for product research, formulation, and initial testing. The procedures for receiving materials, such as the SOPs for inspecting and logging in raw materials and components when you're receiving them. SOPs for materials testing, which are the procedures for conducting quality control tests on the raw materials as they come in, on in-process samples, and in the final product. There's SOPs for cleaning and sanitization, which are detailed instructions for cleaning and sanitizing equipment, production areas, facilities, in order to prevent contamination. I won't go through all of them. They are in your notes, but this is just an overview of the different types of SOPs that could be there. And there's also SOPs around labeling, procedures for accurate and consistent applications of labels to products, including content, placement, and batch information. Then on records and controls, the evaluation of raw materials, as you could understand from the previous sections, is one of the first steps to ensure that a product maintains its suitable uniformity. The input or the end result of a product starts from the input, and raw materials are a big component of that. And which means that thorough evaluation of incoming raw materials is fundamental to ensure that the final product will be consistent and meet quality standards. We have to avoid the use of raw materials that do not conform to required specifications, and this is a non-negotiable rule, as your notes mention. And any raw material that fails to meet its defined specifications should not be used in the production to prevent compromising product quality downstream. There should be, excuse me, I decline that. There should be, within the raw materials records, there should be full traceability, and this is important because the ability to trace raw materials back to their source and production batch is crucial for managing quality, investigating issues, and accountability. It helps to prevent defective, non-conformance, and hazardous products from being manufactured. By controlling raw materials rigorously, the risk of introducing defects, non-conformities, or hazardous substances into the manufacturing process is greatly reduced. So garbage in, compromised product out, or even compromised raw material in. If it's multiple, it could have an additive effect where it is now a hazardous product to the consumer downstream. Okay. And within records and controls, we have to understand the process of receiving, of analyzing, of sampling, different methods. So receiving would be the procedure for accepting raw materials upon delivery. Analyzing is what do we do when the raw material comes in, which is basically testing and evaluating raw materials for conformance to specifications, etc., etc. Another important component is checking the certificate of analysis from the suppliers to provide the initial proof of material quality, which you would need to review and retain. And most labs then have an additional quality check to confirm some aspects of the supplier COA. This is what I just mentioned now on the testing, which is basically performing in-house tests to verify the COE and ensure material quality. Yeah. And on the last part is, or second last part is about approval or rejection of raw material. And this is about formal decision processes for accepting or rejecting raw material batches based on test results that you've gotten in-house, regardless of what the supplier COE is saying. If you trust your internal quality control processes, you should be able to approve or reject the incoming material. And then another last step is the moving and transferring of raw material. And here it is not just a matter of lifting one thing to another. There needs to be documented procedures for moving approved raw materials into storage or production and maintain the identity and integrity of those raw materials as you move them from one area to another. Okay. Examples of records and controls. Some examples include manufacturing procedures and batch records. And this is basically crucial documentation that contains detailed instructions on methods for production or how to make a product. It is the real-time record of the manufacturing process for a specific batch. It is one of the most important documents for traceability, and it should cover the ingredients used, such as the lot number, the quantities, the processing parameters, such as temperatures, mixing time and speeds, in-process control results, the personnel performing each step and their signatures, the equipment used, and even sanitation of sanitation and hygiene SOPs, batch processing records, and these are synonymous to a batch sheet or production record, and it typically has 6 sections, which is laid out in your notes. And then one of the other components is finished goods control, which is basically the final stage of the QC process. And this is the last quality check before a product is released for sale or distribution. And this step or this process ensures total traceability of the final product. Just as raw materials are traceable, the final product must also be traceable back to a specific batch and all associated raw materials. And this, adhering to these things is essential for managing product recall or investigating customer complaints that may arise. And when customer complaints arise within a quality system, this highlights the significance and importance, and this section highlights the significance in the process for handling those complaints when they arise. The first part would be to investigate those complaints. Any complaint from a customer needs to be investigated and not disregarded, because there could be some serious consequences for the company. However, sometimes the complaint comes from incorrect use of products or deviation from how the product should be used. However, you still need to do the due diligence of investigating customer complaints, because sometimes they may seem minor. They still need to be taken seriously, because they can sometimes indicate product defects, safety issues, or process failures, which could lead to reputational damage, legal action, or financial losses. Once complaints come in, especially if they keep coming up, and even if it's just once, it's important to determine the root cause of that problem. And the root cause could be due to an error in the manufacturing process. And it's basically to set up an SOP to prevent this from reoccurring. Because fixing the immediate complaint is not enough. It's to make sure that it doesn't reoccur. Okay, I'm gonna just run through the next sections now. Excuse me. Excuse me. Recall is an important issue in a manufacturing context. It's serious and it's costly, and it's basically one of the indications of a system failure or significant quality failure. And it's important to use traceability methods, which is the procedure used to remove a product of a specific batch number from trade due to its potential harmful findings. So once you've gotten a complaint, you're able to trace back to which batch the complaint originated from. You obviously need to, if you're able to show that there could be a widespread risk to other consumers, it's important to be responsible and to remove that from circulation. And that would mean recalling the product. And that's why traceability is absolutely critical, as it allows the company to precisely identify which batches are affected and where they have been distributed. Okay. In cases where there's serious issues, well, a recall is a serious issue. It is not a minor, and it sometimes may involve health risks, significant financial loss, damage to brand reputation, and potential legal repercussions. And these need a specific system to deal with them. I have 3 more minutes, Bridget, and I'll need to run. And I'm sorry to the students for this. I apologize. Something came up for an external event at work. I'm happy to record the remaining sections and give the slides. I don't know what's best. Do you want to reschedule another day? Do you want me to send the recording for the remaining parts? What's best for everyone? I saw a thumbs up go, but is Bridget still there?
I think a recording will be much better.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. And I do apologize. Literally, the meeting came up at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So there's still the second unit 22, which I didn't get through. So I'll send the recording of that. I'll send it to Bridget. But if you guys decide on the WhatsApp group collectively that you prefer to have another hour, 45 minutes to an hour, sometime before your next lecture, I'm also happy to do that. Okay. Have a good evening, everyone. I'm going to put my email address on the chat if there's questions on the topics covered thus far. And my voice was fading as the evening progressed. I'm going to put my personal email address on the chat. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful. If there's any questions, you can reach me on my personal email address that I've just put on the chat. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.